Welcome to another team selection video, this time ahead of Game Week 7, where there are so many talking points. We had the midweek games, they're all completed now with the exception of the Europa League, and let's wait and see. But we need to cover so many topics, such as Graham Potter to Chelsea, also how that will impact Brighton, their Game Week 8 game being postponed against Crystal Palace, and Mohamed Salah and Liverpool assets. What should we do with them? Because they're just so off at the moment. They lost 4-1 to Napoli last night, and it could have been by a much worse scoreline. Let's get straight into this one, and let's try to get this video to over 200 likes. Ever since I got Robert Sanchez in goal, that's 2 points in 2 game weeks. And then we have the Game Week 8 suspension that we also need to think about. So he hasn't been a good signing so far, despite being one of the highest scoring goalkeepers this season. He is the third highest scoring behind Dean Henderson and Nick Pope. But I still think he's a good option in the long term. But now might be a good time to start jumping off him. Maybe not in Game Week 7 specifically, but when you're looking ahead to Game Week 8, because they have a few tough fixtures on the road anyway. And with that suspension, I think it's the final nail in the coffin. With the exception of my new signing, Kieran Trippier, the rest of my defence was disappointing. Only 4 points between Cancelo, Trent and Reece James. But Kieran Trippier managed to amass 2 bonus points and a clean sheet. And I actually got rid of Robertson for a -4 hit. And luckily enough for me, Robertson was benched and came on around the 60th minute mark. Trent would have got a clean sheet if he had stayed on the pitch for a minute or two longer, but he got substituted out around the 59th minute mark. So that was very disappointing in general, but there you go. These things can happen sometimes. It's just very rare with the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold, who has had a poor season, not just defensively, but also from an FPL perspective. Only 1 return from all the games, and that was a 17-pointer against Bournemouth. But I still like the defence in the long term, but the likes of Cancelo do have some tough fixtures coming up. Reece James is part of a Chelsea defence that have been struggling. Maybe things will improve under their new manager. And as for Trent Alexander-Arnold, poor fixtures, and Liverpool just can't stop conceding goals. It was a pretty dismal week overall because another set of blanks from Mohamed Salah and Martinelli, who had a goal disallowed at Old Trafford. Definitely contentious whether you think it was a foul or not, and it was frustrating as a Martinelli owner, but it was disallowed nonetheless, and he still had a good game overall but wasn't able to really make an impact in the final third. Gross got an assist, which is good to see, his first return since signing for my club, you could say. So 1 return in the first 2 game weeks, which is more than Sanchez can say. Salah, though, I mean, it's just continuous disappointment all season. He hasn't been on it, and he got substituted out in the Napoli game around the 61st minute. And you could look at it in 2 ways. He had an awful performance. He couldn't even control a football against Napoli. And Liverpool did have a better second half, but they still are just disjointed all over the place. Jurgen Klopp talked about a need to reinvent themselves, and they definitely need to if they want to start challenging and maybe securing a top 4 finish, which is probably going to be their main target this season. But Salah is just really weird to see. And actually, in his last 27 games, he's only scored 5 goals from open play for Liverpool, which is a very damning statistic. And when he costs 13 million and you're not going to captain him really, you're only going to be looking at Erling Haaland. I don't think Salah is as essential as he once was. On the bright side, some of my forwards did an incredible job this week. Mitrovic scored a goal against Tottenham despite getting a yellow card, so he really made that -4 hit pay off because I upgraded Archer all the way to the Serbian, as well as getting Trippier in for Andy Robertson. So the -4 hit has paid off, and I expect it to also pay dividends in the weeks to come as well. Mitrovic scored in the game that I expected him to possibly blank in. He's got Chelsea up next, but with Tuchel being sacked, there could be a managerial bounce as soon as this weekend. So I'm a bit less keen on that Chelsea fixture now because we don't know what we're going to get. But I still think Mitrovic has a good chance of returning. Erling Haaland, as always, scoring a goal, getting maximum bonus points, and he's just the best captain option all season. It's a bit boring, to be honest, and at this point, I actually would rather they get rid of the captaincy, but they're not going to do it midway through this season. So just captain Erling Haaland at this point, unless other options, such as hopefully Salah or someone else, can finally come to the fore, so we have some decisions to make. Gabriel Jesus picked up a yellow card, and he continues his awful run against Man United. He had a good performance all round, but he didn't have a shot on target, and he's got no goals and no assists now in 12 games against the Red Devils and 4 yellow cards. So that's why those of you that were thinking of benching him or did so, you know, I completely understood that. I talked about it in the streams, and I'm not too surprised by the blank. But that was my overall performance. Let me show you who my captain was, as well as my overall rank and everything else that you need to know. No surprises here as I captained Erling Haaland and Salah was my vice captain. I took a -4 hit, so I got 43 points overall with that hit in mind. and my overall points is 375, and I had a small red arrow, you could say small, from around 800,000 to 1.1 million, but all things considered, I'm quite happy with the amount of blanks I had, and also some of the issues in my team, but still not a good position to be in when we're 6 game weeks into the season, and I am looking for some dramatic improvement over the next couple of months, and the wildcard could be a great way for me to get back into the mix. However, a lot of people will probably be wildcarding around a similar time. I haven't fully decided yet, but Game Week 8 or Game Week 9 is looking pretty promising and probably like a great time to wildcard, especially for those of you, like myself, who have maybe 2 or 3 Brighton players. I never want to start Ward, so Robert Sanchez will be in goal against Bournemouth. Unfortunately, his game in Game Week 8 will be postponed, so I am actually looking at the possibility of a goalkeeper transfer because I really don't trust Ward at all. I'll be talking about some plans of what I could do in Game Week 8 as well, which is always important to have a good idea of, especially because it can influence your transfer plans for the week coming up, which in this case obviously is Game Week 7. I think there's a good chance of a Brighton clean sheet, but what will the impact be on the departure of Graham Potter? You know, I think that could have a huge impact, ramifications on Brighton's season, and they could start tumbling down the table. And Bournemouth showed their resilience in a 3-2 comeback against Nottingham Forest, so I don't think it will be the easiest game, despite them being, you could say, the whipping boys of the season, but they actually have a good record when they haven't faced a top 6 club so far, so maybe it's a deceptively good fixture, and even more so now with the Brighton manager possibly leaving as early as today. I have a few benching headaches this week, and that will also have an influence in terms of whether I go for a back 3 or a back 4. I'm not fully decided yet, but James, Cancelo and Trent are making up the back line as things stand, and despite Liverpool's woes, I think if Trent starts, I think he has a good chance of a clean sheet against Wolves, but Liverpool really need to get their act together, and to be honest, it's not a bad time to sell them, but maybe give these assets like Trent and Salah one more week before finally offloading them, especially if you're looking to wildcard around Game Week 8 or 9. Cancelo's facing Tottenham, and City have really struggled against Spurs in the last few years, and I wouldn't be surprised if Spurs score a few goals actually and cause City problems on the counter-attack. It could be quite similar to the United-Arsenal game where Arsenal have all the possession, City obviously will have it in this case, and Spurs/United are going to get the chances on the counter. So Cancelo is still a good option in the long term. I'm happy to keep him, but I also wouldn't be too surprised if there's another blank there for the Portuguese fullback, despite his heroics in UCL Fantasy. As for Reece James away to Fulham, let's wait and see what kind of Chelsea team we're going to get. And I have a bit of a clash here with the Fulham striker Mitrovic up against Reece James. And I also have Cucurella, who could also start in this team. So as you can see, I've got plenty of dilemmas to contend with. But this is my back 3 at the moment. And it's the first time this season that I would be playing a back 3. This may be very surprising, but Leon Bailey has been in my starting 11 all week, and I am considering the possibility of going with him because he's facing Leicester, who have been absolutely diabolical. They're arguably the easiest team to play in the league right now, and this is a good-looking midfield in terms of the fixtures, but it just hasn't really been delivering, especially last week. Gross is away to Bournemouth, but once again, I have some concerns about Brighton and which manager's going to come in. Will the interim do a good job as well? I mean, there's so many question marks around Brighton and Chelsea that we just need to see how it pans out. And even if they have short-term pain or short-term success, it doesn't mean they're going to do well in the long term. So very interesting stuff to monitor. Salah at home to Wolves, I think he will start. Some people are kind of speculating that he won't. And whilst that is still a possibility, I think Salah will start and hopefully in some more central positions like he was at the first half of the last season, but I wouldn't have anything guaranteed at that front. And honestly, with the stats that Salah's had, you know, for the last 27 games, as I said earlier, I think that selling Salah is not a bad thing at all, to be honest. But I would give him another week at home to Wolves, and then we could look to sell him with the tough fixtures coming up for Liverpool. Martinelli at home to Everton looks pretty decent. He scored in this fixture, the Game Week 38 fixture last season, and I could see him doing a good job once again. He was unlucky not to get a return against United. So it's a good-looking midfield in terms of the fixtures, but the players themselves haven't been in the greatest form, with the exception of Gross and Martinelli. I'm going with a front 3 once again. Mitrovic, Haaland and Gabriel Jesus, they speak for themselves and they'll start every single week. Some people are considering the possibility of selling Gabriel Jesus this week for the likes of Tony or Mitrovic, even for a -4 hit, and I don't think that makes any sense. Gabriel Jesus is going to face his favourite opponent, Everton. He's got 8 goals in 10 games against them, and I just don't think now is the time to sell. Maybe in a week or two, especially Game Week 9, but I just think it's a far too big of a risk, and he's still owned by 77% of the game, so he's the second highest owned player behind Haaland, who is now number 1 in that regard, and probably wouldn't be a surprise if he's also number 1 in terms of points. Mitrovic at home to Chelsea. I mean, so much can happen in that game, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 3-2 thriller, high-scoring game with both teams scoring a lot of goals, but you just never know. Chelsea could be resolute defensively and show what they're capable of, because they have a good squad on paper, but let's see how they gel, and will the manager be able to get an instant impact from them? I mean, so many question marks, like I said before, but I still like Mitrovic in the long term, and I'm happy that I've signed him. Haaland at home to Tottenham. It's a really tough game on paper, but Haaland can score against absolutely anybody, and honestly, in terms of the captaincy, I think there's just no debate right now. It's a shame, but this is the state of the game right now. Haaland is going to be my captain. He has been all week, and he might even be my permanent captain as things stand. Salah is my vice, and it could be Gabriel Jesus, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. Haaland's going to play, and let's just wait and see what he can do. And as you can see on my bench, my big kind of headache is whether to start Trippier away to West Ham or Leon Bailey away to Leicester. And Cucurella, to be fair, away to Fulham could also do a pretty good job. But then we also have the kind of dilemmas about whether Chilwell or Cucurella will start, and I don't think there's an easy answer despite the recent form of Ben Chilwell. So this is how my team is looking like for Game Week 7. Now let me show you some possibilities of Game Week 8 transfers if I don't wildcard in that game week, and then if I do end up having something like this happening, Game Week 9 could be the week that I finally wildcard. With the Brighton versus Crystal Palace game being postponed in Game Week 8, I just have no space for the likes of Gross and Robert Sanchez. So with Sanchez obviously blanking, and then you've got Ward facing Tottenham, I want to make a goalkeeper transfer in Game Week 8. So Nick Pope will be coming in for Robert Sanchez, and if Perisic goes down by 0.1 million, which is a possibility, then I will be able to afford him, and he would replace Reece James, who would be facing Liverpool. But to be honest, you could arguably actually get Perisic in for Trent, and Liverpool are really off form as well, and Chelsea could be a much different team by that stage. So besides the Liverpool and Chelsea assets, because I just don't know what to think of them at this point, I think the rest of this team would look pretty solid for Game Week 8. But the main focus right now is on Game Week 7, and I'm looking to roll the transfer, have 2 in Game Week 8 as a result, and then I can make some of these proposed transfers that you can see on screen. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Let's get this video to over 200 likes, and we're so close to 14,000 subscribers, so let's keep on pushing. I think we can reach it by the end of this weekend, so let's keep on going. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and you can also check the links in the description below, including the Patreon, the channel memberships, and also the Discord server, the FPL League. All of that good stuff is there. So I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 7 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.